Ayan sat outside the cafe that night, his head resting against the cold wall, his eyes wide open, staring at the dark sky. He hadn't been able to sleep. The weight of everything, the accident, the betrayal of his uncle and aunt, the endless loneliness, pressed down on him like a mountain. His body was tired, but his mind wouldn't rest. Before we continue with the story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon, so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. The sound of laughter came from inside the cafe. People enjoying themselves, sipping tea, eating snacks, living the life he had once known. For Ayan, happiness had turned into a memory he could barely touch. The next morning, as he carried trays and washed cups, Mr. Karim, the cafe owner, called him over. "Ayan, you've been working hard. But I can't pay you more than this. You're still a child." Ayan nodded silently. He wasn't working for money only, he was working for survival. But deep inside, he wished someone would look at him and see more than just a boy who lost everything. That evening, a group of teenage boys entered the cafe. They were from Ayan's school, the same school he had stopped attending after the tragedy. When they saw him in the cafe uniform, carrying cups, they smirked. "Look who it is, Ayan, the orphan waiter!" one of them mocked loudly. The others laughed, making cruel jokes about his parents, his sister, even about him sleeping on the street. Ayan froze, his throat tightening. He wanted to shout, to defend himself, but the words wouldn't come. His hands trembled as he placed the tray down. Tears burned in his eyes, but he refused to let them fall in front of them. After they left, he stepped outside, leaning against the door, his chest rising and falling heavily. For the first time, he whispered, "Why me? Why did you take them from me?" His voice cracked as the night swallowed his words. A gentle voice interrupted his pain. It was Miriam, the young woman who often came to the cafe to study. She stood there, holding a notebook against her chest. "I heard what they said. Don't let them break you, Ayan. You're stronger than you know." Her kindness hit him harder than the boy's cruelty. For months, no one had spoken to him with such warmth. He blinked at her, unsure how to respond. "Life is unfair," she continued softly. "But that doesn't mean you don't matter. You do." For the first time in what felt like forever, Ayan felt a spark of light in the darkness. A stranger's words had reminded him that maybe, just maybe, his story wasn't over yet. That night, as he lay outside under the stars, he thought about Miriam's words. The pain was still there, but a seed of hope had been planted in his heart. And Ayan promised himself one thing: he would not let this cruel world destroy him. The next morning, Ayan woke up shivering in the cold air. He wrapped his thin arms around himself, staring at the busy street. People walked past him, some glancing, some ignoring, some shaking their heads with pity, but no one stopped. He was invisible to the world. When he entered the cafe for his shift, he saw Miriam again, sitting at her usual corner table with her books spread out. For some reason, Ayan felt a pull toward her presence. She wasn't like the others, she noticed him, she saw him. Throughout the day, she kept watching him quietly. When the cafe got crowded, Ayan struggled to carry a heavy tray filled with glasses. His small arms shook under the weight, and suddenly one glass slipped, shattering on the floor. The sound echoed through the cafe. Everyone turned. Mr. Karim frowned, the customers whispered, and Ayan's heart raced. He expected anger, maybe even punishment. But before anyone could speak, Miriam stood up and said loudly, "It's just a glass. He's only a boy. Don't be so harsh." The whole cafe fell silent. Mr. Karim sighed, muttering, "Careful next time, Ayan." And the moment passed. But inside Ayan's chest, something had shifted. Someone had stood up for him, for the first time since his family died. Later that evening, as the cafe closed, Miriam approached him outside. "Do you go to school anymore?" she asked. Ayan lowered his eyes. "No. I can't. I have to work. And there's no one left to send me." His voice broke on the last words. Miriam's face softened. Education is the only way you'll escape this life, Ayan. Don't let them steal your future. Her words stung, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. He had been surviving, but not living. For the first time in months, he thought about his sister. She had always told him he was smart, that he could be anything he wanted. And now, as her memory flickered in his mind, it felt like she was urging him to fight back against the darkness. That night, while lying on the hard ground outside the cafe, Ayan whispered to himself, "I will not stay like this forever. I'll rise for them. For me." The world had taken his family, his home, and his childhood. But it hadn't taken his spirit, not yet. And with Miriam's words echoing in his mind, Ayan felt the first sparks of determination burning inside him. He didn't know how, but he knew one day he would change his fate. The next few days were not easy for Ayan. Miriam's words kept circling in his head like an echo he couldn't silence. Education is the only way you'll escape this life. But how could he study? He barely earned enough at the cafe to feed himself. At night he still slept outside, the cold biting his bones, his stomach often empty. Yet, deep inside, something had changed. He no longer wanted to just survive, he wanted to fight. One evening, after finishing his shift, Ayan noticed a pile of old newspapers near the trash. He picked them up and began reading under the dim streetlight. His eyes were tired, his hands freezing, but he forced himself to continue. Every night after work, while others slept in warm homes, he sat on the sidewalk, reading whatever he could find: newspapers, torn magazines, even discarded schoolbooks left behind by children. It wasn't easy. Sometimes strangers mocked him. "Why waste time? You're just a poor cafe boy," they laughed. Others threw coins at him, not out of kindness but pity. Each insult cut deep, but Ayan gritted his teeth and reminded himself of his promise: "I will rise for them." Weeks passed, and slowly, his reading improved. He began practicing writing with a broken pencil he had found. The pavement became his notebook, and the streetlight his classroom. Customers from the cafe often saw him scribbling letters on scraps of paper late at night. Some shook their heads, others smiled faintly, but no one truly understood what drove him. One day, a kind old man who visited the cafe regularly noticed Ayan's efforts. After finishing his tea, he called Ayan over. "Boy, every night I see you with books. Why do you work so hard when you have nothing?" Ayan swallowed hard before answering, his voice steady. "Because if I stop trying, sir, then I will lose everything I have left of my family's dreams." The old man looked at him silently for a long moment. Then, without another word, he handed Ayan a small, worn-out schoolbook. "Keep this. It's not much, but it helped me when I was your age." That night, Ayan held the book tightly to his chest. For the first time, he felt like the universe had noticed his struggle. He had nothing, not money, not comfort, not family, but he had determination. And with that determination, he promised himself he would not just survive, he would learn, he would grow, and one day, he would make his parents and sister proud. His journey was only beginning. The more Ayan pushed himself, the more the world seemed determined to break him. At the cafe, customers often whispered cruel things within earshot. "Look at him," one man chuckled. "A stray dog with a book. As if reading will change his fate." Others were harsher, mocking his clothes, his dirt-stained hands, the way he stumbled over words when reading aloud to himself. Every insult stung, but Ayan refused to show his pain. Instead, he swallowed his anger and kept working, saving every coin he could. Nights grew colder, and hunger gnawed at him, but still he sat under the flickering streetlight, tracing letters with trembling fingers. His writing improved, his reading faster. Yet the laughter around him grew louder too. Even his uncle sometimes walked by, sneering. "You'll never be more than a cafe boy," he hissed. "Your family's gone, Ayan. Stop dreaming." But Ayan couldn't stop. He wouldn't. One night, as he struggled through a difficult passage in his book, a group of older boys approached. They snatched the book from his hands, laughing as they tossed it around. "So little orphan thinks he's a scholar now?" one jeered. When Ayan tried to grab it back, they shoved him to the ground. For a moment, his chest tightened, and tears threatened to spill. But then he stood up, blood on his lip, determination in his eyes. "Laugh if you want," he said, voice shaking but firm. "One day, you'll see me in a place you'll never reach." The boys stared at him, surprised by his courage, before walking away with mocking laughs. Luckily, one tossed the book back at him. Torn at the edges, but still his. Ayan wiped his face, clutching it tightly. He whispered to himself, "I'll prove them all wrong. No matter what it takes." From that day, he worked harder. At the cafe, he memorized words from newspapers customers left behind. He practiced speaking English phrases he overheard, even when people mocked his accent. He saved small coins, hoping that one day he could afford real classes. His struggle was far from over, but something inside him had grown stronger. No matter how many laughed, no matter how many tried to tear him down, Ayan was learning the one thing no one could take away from him: hope. It had been weeks since Ayan's last confrontation with the bullies. He carried on, silently battling hunger, exhaustion, and the weight of loneliness. But something inside him had shifted. His courage was no longer a flicker, it was becoming a flame. One late evening, after the cafe had closed, Ayan sat outside under the dim streetlight, his book balanced carefully on his knees. His lips moved as he whispered each word, repeating them until he got them right. His hands were rough, his clothes still worn, but his focus never broke. From across the street, an elderly man watched. He had been coming to the cafe for weeks, always sitting quietly in the corner, sipping tea and leaving without a word. But tonight, curiosity pulled him closer. "Boy," the man said gently, startling Ayan. "Why do you sit here every night, reading under a broken lamp when the world has already gone to sleep?" Ayan looked up nervously. Most people only approached him to mock or scold. He hesitated, then whispered, "Because it's the only way. If I don't learn, if I don't grow, I'll never be more than this. And I can't let that happen. I have to be more." The old man studied him, eyes softening. Slowly, he reached into his bag and pulled out a stack of neatly kept notebooks and a fountain pen. "Then take these," he said. "A mind like yours deserves more than scraps of paper." Ayan blinked, frozen. "For me?" The man nodded. "For you. I was a teacher once. I can't ignore the hunger I see in your eyes. It's not just for food, but for knowledge." He placed the notebooks in Ayan's trembling hands. "Every great man starts somewhere small, Ayan. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Tears welled in Ayan's eyes. It was the first time in months someone had shown him kindness. His throat tightened as he whispered, "Thank you, sir. I won't waste this." The man smiled faintly. "Good. Because one day, the world will hear your name." That night, as Ayan scribbled his first notes into the clean pages, his heart swelled with something he had almost forgotten: faith. For the first time since losing his family, he didn't feel entirely alone. The mornings in the small town were always the same: gray skies, hurried footsteps, and faces that looked past Ayan as if he were invisible. But this morning felt different. The elderly man who had given him the notebooks returned to the cafe, and this time, he didn't come just to drink tea. After Ayan had finished wiping tables, the man motioned him over. "Sit, boy," he said firmly, though his eyes carried warmth. Ayan sat, clutching his rag nervously. "Did I do something wrong, sir?" The man shook his head. "No, Ayan. You did something right. I watched you last night, filling those pages as if they were treasures. Most children your age complain about studying, but you treat it like life itself." Ayan lowered his gaze. "It is life for me. If I don't learn, if I don't fight, I'll always be stuck where I am." The man leaned forward, lowering his voice. "What if I told you I could get you into evening classes at the local school? It's not much, but it's a start." You'll have to work hard, harder than anyone else. But you'll be learning properly, with teachers, books, and lessons. Ayan's breath caught. For a moment he thought he had misheard. School? After all this time? He blinked rapidly, his voice breaking. You mean I can go back? But I don't have money, sir. Not even for books. The man smiled faintly. Leave that to me. I'll cover the fees. But only on one condition. Ayan's heart pounded. What condition? That you never give up, the man said. Not when it gets hard, not when others laugh at you, and not when you feel like the world is against you. You carry on. Because if you do, I promise you, this small town won't be able to hold you forever. Tears blurred Ayan's vision. He wanted to hug the man, but instead he pressed his fists to his chest, nodding hard. I swear, sir. I'll never give up. Never. That night, as he lay under the stars outside the cafe, Ayan whispered to himself. This is just the beginning. For the first time, I can see a way out. The boy who had been left alone was no longer just surviving, he was starting to dream again. The classroom smelled of chalk and ink, so different from the dusty streets and noisy cafe where Ayan had spent most of his days. For the first time in years, he sat at a wooden desk, a thin notebook in front of him, his heart racing faster than the ticking clock on the wall. The other students were his age, or younger, but their eyes told him everything. Some whispered, some smirked. They knew who he was, the orphan boy who worked at the tea cafe, the boy who slept outside. When the teacher introduced him, there was a soft murmur of laughter from the back row. This is Ayan. He will be joining our evening classes, the teacher said firmly. A boy with neatly combed hair leaned toward his friend and whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. Why would someone like him even bother? He'll never catch up. A few giggled. Another girl wrinkled her nose. He smells like the street, she muttered. Ayan's face burned, but he kept his eyes fixed on the blackboard. He remembered the man's words, never give up. Not when they laugh. Not when it hurts. When the first lesson began, the teacher asked a simple math question. The room fell silent. No one raised their hand. Ayan hesitated, then lifted his. The teacher nodded, surprised. And with trembling lips, Ayan gave the right answer. A few students frowned, some rolled their eyes, but others paused. For the first time, they saw more than just a homeless boy. They saw someone trying. That night, walking back to the cafe, Ayan felt the sting of the whispers and laughter. But underneath the pain was something stronger, pride. He had faced them, and he hadn't broken. Lying under the stars, he whispered. One day, they'll see me not as the boy who was left alone, but as the boy who rose. The evening sky was painted orange when Ayan entered the classroom again. He carried the same worn-out notebook, its pages already filling with hurried notes and shaky handwriting. The other students were already seated, their crisp uniforms and polished shoes a sharp contrast to his faded shirt and scuffed sandals. As soon as he stepped inside, the whispering began. There he is again. Doesn't he ever get tired? He'll quit soon. Just wait. Ayan lowered his gaze, ignoring the sting of their words, and quietly took his seat at the corner. But not everyone's eyes held ridicule. Mr. Harris, the math teacher, had been watching Ayan closely since the first day. He had noticed the boy's eagerness, his hunger to learn, the way his eyes lit up when a problem was solved. Something rare. Something special. That evening, after class ended, Mr. Harris called out, Ayan, stay back for a moment. The boy froze, his heart pounding. Had he done something wrong? But when the room emptied, Mr. Harris walked over with a gentle smile. You're different, Ayan. Not because of where you come from, but because you refuse to give up. I see it in your eyes. You remind me of myself when I was your age. Ayan blinked, confused. But sir, everyone else thinks I don't belong here. Mr. Harris put a hand on his shoulder. Greatness never comes from fitting in. It comes from standing tall when the world tries to push you down. I'll help you, Ayan. But you must promise me one thing, no matter how cruel they get, no matter how heavy the burden feels, you must not stop. Ayan swallowed hard, his chest tightening. No one had spoken to him like this in years. For a moment, he felt the warmth of family again. I promise, he whispered. That night, as Ayan lay outside the cafe, staring at the stars, he replayed Mr. Harris's words again and again. For the first time, hope didn't feel like a dream, it felt like a path. And though tomorrow would bring more laughter, more taunts, he knew one thing: he was no longer fighting alone. Someone believed in him. The next morning, Ayan walked into the classroom with a quiet determination in his steps. He clutched his notebook tightly, the words of Mr. Harris still echoing in his mind. No matter how cruel they get, you must not stop. But as soon as he entered, the storm began. Look who's here, the charity case. Don't sit near him, he smells like the street. Why don't you go back to your cafe job, beggar? Laughter filled the room. Ayan's cheeks burned, but he kept moving forward. He didn't answer, didn't argue. Instead, he sat down, opened his notebook, and focused on the lesson. At first, the others were annoyed by his silence. Then they decided to push harder. One boy yanked his chair. Another spilled water on his notebook. A third mocked him loudly, repeating every word Ayan said in class in a twisted, exaggerated voice. For a moment, Ayan felt his chest tighten. He wanted to run. He wanted to cry. But then, he remembered Mr. Harris's voice. Stand tall. So, when the math question was written on the board, Ayan's trembling hand shot up. The class fell silent, surprised. Mr. Harris nodded. Ayan walked to the front, his sandals scraping against the floor. His hands shook as he picked up the chalk. He could hear whispers behind him. But when he started solving, something changed. His mind sharpened. Step by step, number by number, he wrote the solution. When he placed the final answer on the board, correct and neat, Mr. Harris clapped softly. Excellent, Ayan. Very well done. The class went quiet. Some rolled their eyes, others muttered under their breath, but none could deny what they saw. The boy they mocked had just solved the problem none of them could. A small smile tugged at Ayan's lips. It wasn't much. Just a single problem. Just one answer. But to him, it felt like a giant victory. That night, lying outside the cafe, Ayan whispered to himself. They can laugh. But they can't stop me. For the first time, he drifted to sleep with a sense of strength growing inside him, an ember slowly turning into fire. Ayan had come far, much farther than anyone in his small town ever believed he could. From the boy who used to sleep outside the cafe, he had grown into a young man with grit carved into his bones. But life had not stopped testing him. Each small victory was followed by a challenge, as if the world wanted to see just how much pain one's soul could carry before breaking. One evening, after finishing his shift at the cafe, Ayan walked alone through the dimly lit streets. His body was exhausted, but his mind was restless. The whispers of the townspeople followed him wherever he went. That's the boy whose family died in that accident. He's cursed. Trouble always finds him. No matter how hard he tries, he'll always be nothing. The words cut deep, but Ayan had learned to wear silence like armor. Still, the weight of loneliness pressed heavier with each passing day. The truth was, he missed the warmth of a family, the sound of his mother's voice, the laughter of his sister, the steady hand of his father on his shoulder. No amount of hard work could fill that emptiness. One night, as rain poured down and thunder rolled across the skies, Ayan sat outside the cafe shivering beneath the awning. His clothes were soaked, his stomach empty, and for the first time in years, he whispered to himself, maybe they were right. Maybe I'll never escape this life. Tears mixed with raindrops as he buried his face in his hands. That was his breaking point, the moment where all the strength he had built seemed to collapse under the weight of grief and exhaustion. But just as the darkness threatened to swallow him whole, a stranger stopped in front of the cafe. A tall man, his face half hidden under an umbrella, looked down at Ayan with eyes full of recognition, as if he had been searching for him all along. "You don't belong here," the man said softly. "You were never meant to be forgotten." Ayan looked up, confused and trembling. His heart pounded in his chest as a chill ran down his spine. Who was this man? And why did his words sound like more than pity, like a truth Ayan had never been told? The storm raged on, but Ayan felt something shift inside him. He didn't know it yet, but this encounter was about to change everything. Ayan sat in the small corner of the cafe after closing time, his hands still trembling from the conversation he had earlier with the mysterious man. The man had said only one thing before leaving. "Your parents weren't who you think they were." Those words echoed in his head like a storm. He had always seen his parents as simple, hard-working people, his father running a modest business, his mother caring for the family with warmth and love. They were ordinary, middle-class, decent. So what did that sentence mean? That night, as Ayan tried to sleep on the bench outside the cafe, his mind wouldn't let him rest. He remembered how his mother would sometimes get lost staring at old photographs, or how his father would lock away certain papers in a wooden box. As a child, he never questioned it. But now, those details haunted him. The next morning, the man returned. His face was lined with years of secrets, his voice low and grave. "Do you really want to know the truth?" he asked. Ayan nodded. His heart pounded, but he didn't back away. The man sighed. "Your father once testified against powerful people. Men who never forgave him. The accident that took your family." He paused, looking at Ayan with heavy eyes. "It wasn't fate. It was revenge." Ayan's breath caught. His chest tightened as though someone had crushed it with bare hands. He had imagined 1,000 reasons for his suffering, but never this. "Your mother knew," the man continued, "but she chose silence. She thought she could protect you by keeping the past buried. But the past, it always finds a way back." Tears blurred Ayan's vision. All this time, he had blamed life, blamed luck, even himself. And now he realized there had been hidden enemies, shadows watching his family, waiting for the right moment to strike. The man leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. "They will come for you too, Ayan. Unless you're ready to fight back." For the first time, Ayan felt not just pain, but fire. His struggle was no longer just about survival. It was about uncovering the truth his parents had died keeping. And as he clenched his fists, he whispered to himself, "I won't run anymore." The next morning, Ayan woke up earlier than usual. His body was tired, but his mind was sharp, burning with the words of the old man. "Your father once testified against powerful people." If it was true, then his parents had never been ordinary. And if they had enemies, maybe, just maybe, they had also left something behind for him. He walked back to the old house, his childhood home. The place was now locked, abandoned after his uncle and aunt had thrown him out. The windows were covered in dust, the garden overgrown with weeds, but to Ayan, it still smelled of memories. Breaking in wasn't hard. One small window near the back was loose, and with a bit of effort, he climbed inside. His heart raced as he stood in the living room. Everything was coated in silence, as though time itself had frozen the day his parents died. He began searching. Drawers, shelves, cupboards, anything that could hide a clue. Hours passed, and frustration grew. But then, in his father's study, Ayan noticed something strange: the old wooden box. The same box his father used to lock away papers. With trembling hands, Ayan pulled it out. The lock was rusty, but a sharp tool from the drawer helped pry it open. Inside, there were letters, faded documents, and a small, leather-bound diary. He opened the first page of the diary, and his mother's handwriting stared back at him. "If you are reading this, Ayan, it means the truth has finally reached you." Ayan's breath caught in his throat. His mother had written these words for him. As he flipped through the pages, secrets unraveled. His father had once been a witness in a massive corruption case, exposing men who controlled money, power, and politics. They had promised revenge. His mother had lived in fear, always watching over him, always trying to keep him safe. But the diary also revealed something even darker: names, coded messages, and a warning. Never trust anyone who comes too close. They may be part of the same shadows that destroyed us. Ayan's hands shook. He didn't know whether to feel anger, sorrow, or fear. But one thing was clear: his parents had died protecting him. And now, their enemies were still out there. Suddenly, a noise came from outside. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, approaching the house. Ayan quickly closed the diary, tucked it under his shirt, and pressed his back against the wall. Whoever it was, they weren't here by accident. And for the first time in his life, Ayan realized the past wasn't just a story written in old pages. It was alive, hunting him. The creaking footsteps grew louder. Ayan held his breath, clutching the diary against his chest. His heart pounded so hard he feared it would give him away. The front door groaned open. Dust swirled in the air as a tall figure stepped inside, their silhouette sharp against the faint morning light. Ayan pressed himself deeper into the shadows of the study, silently praying the stranger wouldn't notice him. But the figure moved slowly, like someone who knew exactly where to go. And then, he heard it. A deep voice. Low, steady. I know you're here, Ayan. Every muscle in his body froze. The stranger knew his name. Your father was a brave man. The voice continued, footsteps echoing closer. And your mother, she sacrificed everything. Do you think their enemies have forgotten? Do you think you can hide? Ayan's throat was dry, but something inside him refused to stay silent. He stepped out, fists clenched. Who are you? The stranger turned. His face was partially hidden under a cap, but his eyes, sharp, piercing, locked on Ayan. There was something terrifying yet strangely familiar about him. I was once your father's friend, the man said. And his greatest mistake. The words hit like thunder. Before Ayan could react, the man tossed a folded piece of paper onto the floor. They're watching you. Every step, every move. If you want to survive, follow the address on this paper. But don't trust anyone. Not even me. And just like that, the stranger turned and walked out, his heavy boots fading into silence. Ayan stood there, frozen, the paper trembling in his hand. His instincts screamed at him, this could be a trap. But the diary in his shirt, the warnings from his mother, and now the stranger's words all connected into a terrifying truth. The shadows weren't just hunting him. They were getting closer. Ayan looked out of the broken window. The street was empty, as if nothing had happened. But his world had changed again. He unfolded the paper. A single address was written. A warehouse. On the edge of town. He knew one thing for certain: if he wanted answers, if he wanted to fight back, he had to go. But the moment he stepped out of that house, there would be no turning back. Night had fallen by the time Ayan reached the edge of town. The warehouse stood like a dark beast against the moonlit sky, its broken windows glowing faintly with the flicker of a single light inside. He clutched the paper tighter, his pulse racing. Every instinct told him this could be a trap, but every unanswered question pushed him forward. The iron door creaked as he slipped inside. Dust, rust, and silence hung in the air. Rows of abandoned crates lined the walls, but at the center of the warehouse sat a single wooden table. On it, a folder. Ayan's footsteps echoed as he approached. His hands trembled as he flipped the folder open. Inside were photographs. His parents. Smiling. Standing beside the same stranger he had seen hours ago. And then, another photo. His father, shaking hands with a man in a black suit, his face hidden in the shadows. Behind them was a symbol painted on the wall, a circle split in half, one side white, the other black. The words underneath made Ayan's blood run cold. Project Serpent. Operation, silence the bloodline. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence. The sharp metallic click of a gun. Ayan froze. The same stranger stepped out of the darkness, his face clearer now under the light. His jaw was sharp, his eyes hollowed with years of secrets. "I warned you, Ayan," he said. "Once you open the door to the past, you can never close it again." Ayan's voice cracked, but he forced the words out. "What is this? Who are these people? Why did my parents die?" The man lowered the gun, sighing deeply. His voice carried the weight of betrayal. "Your parents weren't victims. They were fighters. They belonged to an underground group, the Circle. They believed they were protecting the world, but their choices created enemies far more dangerous than they imagined. And now, they want you dead too." The folder slipped from Ayan's hands, papers scattering across the floor. His mind swirled with disbelief and terror. "Why me?" he whispered. The man's eyes softened for a brief moment. "Because you're the last piece of their legacy. And whether you like it or not, they will come for you." Before Ayan could reply, the warehouse lights flickered. A red laser dot appeared on the man's chest. His eyes widened, then a gunshot shattered the silence. The man collapsed, blood seeping onto the dusty floor. Ayan gasped, spinning around, but saw nothing. The shadows swallowed the shooter. With shaking hands, he crouched beside the dying man. The stranger's lips moved, his voice barely a whisper. "Find the key, hidden in the diary, before they do." And then silence. The warehouse grew colder, the shadows thicker. Ayan's world had just exploded. He grabbed the folder, stuffed it into his bag, and ran into the night. The sound of distant footsteps echoed behind him. The hunt had begun. The night air was biting as Ayan stumbled back to the cafe, his mind spinning with the stranger's last words. The diary. The key. He locked himself inside, pulled out his old backpack, and searched until his fingers brushed against the worn leather cover of his mother's diary. He hadn't opened it in years. It was too painful, every word a reminder of the life he had lost. But now, it might hold the answers he desperately needed. He sat at the small table, the yellow cafe light flickering above him, and opened the diary. The first few pages were filled with his mother's handwriting, soft, elegant words about daily life, her love for her children, and her hope for their future. Tears welled in Ayan's eyes, but he pushed them back. He needed to keep going. Halfway through, he noticed something strange. One page was thicker than the others, as if two had been glued together. His heart raced. Carefully, he tore along the edge, and a small folded note slipped out. It wasn't just a note. It was a map. Ayan spread it on the table. It was rough, hand-drawn, but unmistakably a map of their old town. His childhood home was marked with an X, but another mark lay further outside the town, deep in the woods, near the abandoned railway tracks. Next to it, in his mother's handwriting, were 3 words. "The key awaits." A chill ran down his spine. Suddenly, he heard a creak outside the cafe. His head snapped up. Through the dusty glass window, he spotted shadows moving. Someone was out there. Watching. Quickly, he stuffed the map into his jacket and blew out the light. Silence swallowed the room. Then bang. The door rattled as if someone had tried to push it open. Ayan's heart hammered in his chest. He grabbed a metal rod from under the counter, holding his breath. Footsteps circled the cafe. Whoever they weren't going away. Then, just as suddenly as it started, silence returned. Ayan waited in the darkness, clutching the diary against his chest. Finally, he whispered to himself, trembling but determined. "If this key is what they want, then I have to find it before they do." He knew his journey was no longer about survival. It was about uncovering the truth his parents had died to protect. And as the night deepened, he made a vow, whatever waited for him in those woods, he would face it. Because now, the past was chasing him. The town was silent when Ayan stepped outside the cafe, the diary and the map pressed tightly against his chest. The night was cold, the kind that sank into the bones, but it wasn't the chill that made him shiver. It was the thought of those footsteps circling the cafe just moments ago. Still, he couldn't wait. Whoever was after the key might already be on their way to the place marked on the map. He had no choice but to go now. The road toward the woods was long and cracked, broken streetlights flickering every few steps. Ayan walked quickly, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. The shadows seemed alive, stretching and curling as though they wanted to pull him in. When he finally reached the edge of the woods, the air grew heavier. The trees stood tall and close together, their branches clawing at the sky. A faint fog drifted along the ground, and every step crunched loudly against the fallen leaves. "This is insane," he whispered to himself, tightening his grip on the map. But his mother's words echoed in his head, "The key awaits." Deeper and deeper he went, following the rough path toward the old railway tracks. The silence was thick, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the snap of a twig beneath his feet. Then he froze. Behind him, footsteps. He held his breath, listening. Slow, deliberate, and getting closer. He ducked behind a tree, heart pounding, and peered into the fog. A figure emerged. Tall. Cloaked in shadow. Whoever it was moved with purpose, as if they already knew where to go. Ayan's stomach dropped. Thereafter the key too. He stayed hidden, clutching the diary. The figure stopped, turned slightly, as if sensing him. Ayan bit his lip to keep from making a sound. The stranger's head tilted, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed like their eyes locked through the darkness. Then, without a word, the figure kept walking, heading deeper into the woods. Ayan let out a shaky breath and waited until they disappeared into the fog. Then, silently, he followed at a distance. Minutes later, the trees opened into a clearing. There, standing like a skeleton of the past, was the abandoned railway station. Rusted tracks stretched out into nowhere, and in the center of the clearing, a half-buried chest lay beneath the broken wooden platform. The stranger was already there, kneeling, trying to dig it out. Ayan's pulse raced. "That's it. That's what my mother left me." But before he could move, the figure stopped digging and slowly turned, a cruel smile visible even in the dim moonlight. "I was wondering when you'd show up, Ayan." The boy froze. The stranger knew his name. The fog thickened, the forest fell silent, and Ayan realized, this wasn't a race anymore. This was a trap. Ayan's breath caught in his throat. The stranger stepped closer, the crunch of boots echoing across the empty clearing. The fog curled around them like smoke, hiding parts of his face, yet the way he said Ayan's name sent a chill racing down his spine. How do you know me?" Ayan asked, his voice trembling but steady enough to hide his fear. The figure chuckled, low and bitter. "Because I knew your parents long before you were born. And now you've come to finish what they couldn't." Ayan gripped the diary tighter, his knuckles white. "My parents?" Every nerve in his body screamed at him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. He needed answers. The stranger stepped into a shaft of pale moonlight. His face was revealed, sharp features, a scar across his cheek, eyes cold and calculating. He looked like someone who had seen too much, someone who carried darkness in his soul. "I was your father's brother," the man said, his voice edged with both pride and venom. Ayan's heart nearly stopped. My uncle?" The man nodded. "The world may call me Farhan, but to you, I am the shadow of the family your father tried to erase. And now, boy, I'll take back what was stolen from me." He pointed at the half-buried chest beneath the platform. "The key." Ayan staggered back, his thoughts spinning. He remembered whispers from his grandmother, unfinished sentences about an estranged brother. Someone his father never spoke of. Could it be true? "But my father never mentioned you." "Not once," Ayan said, his voice cracking. Farhan's eyes darkened. "Because he was ashamed. Ashamed of what I knew. Ashamed of what your family did. That chest," he pointed again, his finger trembling with fury, "holds the truth that destroyed us all." The forest seemed to grow heavier, the silence pressing in. Ayan felt his entire world tilting. Everything he thought he knew about his parents, his life, it was slipping away. Farhan smirked. "So tell me, Ayan. Will you stand in my way, or will you help me open the chest your mother died protecting?" The boy's lips parted, his breath shallow. He could feel the diary in his hands grow heavier, as if the ink itself was waiting for his answer. And then, he heard it. A voice. Soft. Familiar. Almost like a whisper carried on the wind. Ayan, trust no one. It was his mother's voice. His eyes widened. Farhan stepped closer, his hand reaching out. Give it to me, boy. Ayan backed away, the forest alive with the pounding of his heartbeat. No, he whispered, shaking his head. I'll find the truth myself. Farhan's smile disappeared. His eyes hardened like stone. Then you've made a mistake. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble as the fog thickened, the night swallowing the clearing whole. To be continued,